The first time I ever held a dollar bill in my hand, I was 7 years old, standing in the back of a greasy little diner where my uncle let me wipe tables in exchange for pocket change. Most kids my age were busy trading Pokemon cards or watching Saturday morning cartoons, but I was memorizing the lunch specials and learning how to refill ketchup bottles without making a mess. My name's Brandon, I'm 20 now, and I own that same diner. Except it's not a dump anymore. I renovated it top to bottom, redesigned the menu, and now it pulls in more on a Saturday night than it used to in a whole month. It's called Red Oak Grill. Locals love it. Tourists rave about it. But if you ask my parents, I didn't build anything. I stole it. I wish I could say I was shocked by their reaction, but honestly, that's been the story of my life. I was never the golden child. That role belonged to my older sister, Kayla, 4 years my senior, destined from birth to be the star. When she played piano in the second grade talent show, my parents called it a brilliant performance and took her out for ice cream. When I took third place in the regional spelling bee, that's nice. Now go clean your room. Kayla was the one with the dance recitals, the acting camps, the expensive private lessons. I was the kid who fixed things around the house when the faucet dripped or the dryer stopped spinning. Don't get me wrong, I didn't resent her at first. Not really. I figured that's just how things were. She was into glamorous stuff, and I liked working with my hands. She was loud, dramatic, and attention-hungry. I preferred being in the background, observing. I got a quiet thrill out of solving problems nobody else wanted to deal with. I didn't need the spotlight. I needed purpose. I found it the summer I turned 14, when a friend of my uncle needed someone to work the fryer at his burger joint for minimum wage under the table. I jumped on it like it was a scholarship. That was the first real job I ever had, and I treated it like an internship at a Fortune 500 company. I'd ride my busted bike across town at 6 in the morning, wearing a secondhand uniform 2 sizes too big, and I never complained. Not once. I learned to man the grill, take orders, handle inventory, even mop the bathrooms. The owner, Old Man Ramirez, started calling me Chef B, even though I was mostly just flipping patties and dodging grease burns. I didn't care. I was proud of what I was doing. And every single dollar I earned went straight into a savings account I opened without telling anyone. No fancy sneakers, no parties, no gaming consoles. I had a plan. Meanwhile, Kayla was floundering. At first, she wanted to be a Broadway actress, then a TV star, then a pop singer. She'd get obsessed with some new dream every 6 months, convinced she was about to be discovered. My parents fueled the delusion, paying for headshots, studio time, and once even flying her to LA for a networking workshop that turned out to be a glorified tourist scam. Each time she came back defeated, they blamed the world, not her. The industry's cruel, they'd say. They don't know real talent. And I'd nod silently from the doorway, reeking of fryer oil, my fingertips blistered from another 10-hour shift. I don't think they ever really noticed how much I worked. They knew I had a job, sure, but they treated it like a summer fling. Don't get stuck in fast food. My dad once warned me, as if I was aimless. As if I didn't have a goal already forming in my mind. They never asked what I was saving for. They didn't ask much about me at all, really. I wasn't neglected. I had a roof, meals, and clean clothes. But emotionally, it was like I was just a guest in their house. The invisible sibling. Things started shifting when I was about 17. I'd been working nonstop for 3 years by then. Weekends, school nights, holidays. And I had quietly amassed enough in my savings to consider a small business loan. I started doing research after work, studying food costs, lease agreements, hiring practices. I even shadowed a few restaurant managers in the area just by offering to sweep floors or help close for free. I was obsessed, but in the best way. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had a future I wasn't borrowing from someone else's dream. That summer, Ramirez pulled me aside during a slow lunch hour. He'd been coughing a lot lately and looked more tired than usual. "Brandon," he said, dragging out the syllables like he was weighing them. "I'm thinking of retiring. This place needs someone who gives a damn. You interested?" I thought he was joking. I laughed. He didn't. He meant it. I remember walking home that night with 1,000 thoughts running through my head. I could see it already, repainting the walls, updating the booths, creating a logo, maybe even adding outdoor seating. I had about $32,000 saved at that point, and with Ramirez offering a friendly price plus some financing options, I knew I could make it work. It was risky. I was barely an adult. But it was real. I waited a week before telling my parents. I figured maybe, just maybe, they'd surprise me. Maybe they'd be proud. Maybe they'd finally see me for something other than Kayla's shadow. Instead, my mom blinked at me like I'd just said I was joining the circus. You want to buy a restaurant? With what? Your burger money. My dad didn't even look up from his phone. That's not a real career, Brandon. You need to go to college. Get a degree. Kayla, lounging across the sofa with her iced coffee, smirked. Wow. So that's why you never helped me with my GoFundMe for my film project. You were hoarding it for your little burger fantasy. It's not a fantasy, I said, trying to stay calm. I already talked to the owner. He's willing to sell. I have the savings, and I'm applying for a small business loan to cover the rest. My mom scoffed. That's money you should be using to build a real future. Not playing restaurant. You mean like all the money you poured into Kayla's acting classes? That was the first time I said it out loud. I didn't plan to. It just slipped. And when it did, the air changed. Kayla sat up slowly, like a lion noticing someone had wandered too close. Excuse me. You heard me, I said, voice steady but firm. You've had years of chances, tens of thousands in help. And every time you give up and move on to the next shiny thing. But when I want to actually do something with my own money, something I've worked for, you all act like I'm throwing my life away. You wouldn't even have a work ethic if it weren't for this family, my dad snapped. Don't act like you did it all alone. I kind of did, I said quietly. That was the beginning, the first crack in the dam. What I didn't know then was that this wasn't just about pride or disbelief. This wasn't just a family misunderstanding or a cold shoulder. This was the start of something bigger, something darker. Because a few weeks later, after the sale went through, after I signed the papers and took over the Red Oak Grill, I heard Kayla whispering to my mom on the porch. I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I did. He didn't build that place. He stole it. That diner was always going to be mine. I froze in the hallway. Wait, what? She had never worked a day in food service. She couldn't tell a spatula from a ladle. Where did this idea even come from? But that whisper was only the beginning. Because a month later, I got served. A lawsuit. From my own parents. Claiming I defrauded them, and my sister, by illegally acquiring an asset that rightfully belonged to the family legacy. The same family that mocked me for flipping burgers. The same family that never asked what I was saving for. And that's when I realized they weren't just disappointed. They wanted to take it from me. All of it. And they were willing to drag me through court to do it. I remember just staring at the envelope in my hands like it was some kind of prank. It didn't make sense. There was a waxy sticker sealing the top, the kind that fancy law firms use to make you feel small before you even open it. My name was printed in block letters. No return address. No warning. Just cold, official weight in my palm, like the air itself was shifting. The first thing I saw when I opened it was my full legal name, Brandon Allen Ross, followed by a case number and a lot of formal language I didn't fully understand. But I recognized the names listed under plaintiffs, David Ross and Helen Ross. My parents. And in the attached affidavit, Kayla Ross, the golden child. I sat down right there on the floor of the kitchen at Red Oak Grill. The lunch rush had just ended. The place smelled like fries and lemon cleaner, and my chef was in the back yelling at a vendor over misdelivered onions. I should have been figuring out payroll or dealing with our POS system freezing again. Instead, I sat on the tile like a kid reading a report card, trying to process the fact that my family had just dragged me into court. The core of their claim was surreal. They argued that the restaurant I bought from Mr. Ramirez had originally been offered to the Ross family, as in, to all of us, because of a long-standing verbal agreement between Mr. Ramirez and my dad. They insisted that my actions in purchasing it as an individual were dishonest and manipulative, and that I had stolen a generational opportunity from the family, especially from Kayla, who had always expressed interest in the culinary arts. Culinary arts? Kayla once burned toast in a toaster. She thought aioli was a kind of yoga, but now, according to this affidavit, she'd apparently been passionate about owning a farm-to-table concept for years, and my sudden move to purchase the restaurant had undermined her dreams and years of effort. They even claimed I used family connections and resources that were never mine to begin with. I sat there, feeling like someone had yanked the floor out from under me. Not because I thought they'd win. Legally, I knew I'd bought the restaurant fair and square. But emotionally, it hit like a truck. I'd worked 6 years without asking anyone for a dime. I hadn't borrowed money from my parents, hadn't lived off their support since I was 16. The grill, the booths, the broken espresso machine, I fixed myself. That was my sweat, my dream. And now they were trying to paint me as a thief. I didn't respond to them right away. I needed to think, process, figure out what the game was. Because this wasn't just about money. It was about control. I didn't have to wait long for a follow-up. That weekend, I went to my parents' house to talk. I don't know why. Some part of me was still hoping it was all a misunderstanding. That maybe the lawyer sent the wrong letter. That maybe this was Kayla lashing out and my parents would shut it down. I walked in through the back door. Same house I grew up in. Same creaky floorboard by the fridge. Same scent of artificial lemon and vanilla from Mom's plug-in fresheners. But it didn't feel like home anymore. They were all in the kitchen when I arrived, Mom, Dad, and Kayla. My dad was sipping coffee like it was any normal Saturday. Mom was slicing cucumbers in that slow, methodical way she does when she's hiding tension. Kayla? She was scrolling her phone, nails freshly done, like a queen waiting for someone to entertain her. Did you really file a lawsuit against me? I asked. No hello. No preamble. I needed to hear them say it. My mom didn't even look up. You left us no choice. No choice. I blinked. You mocked me for flipping burgers. You told me I was wasting my time. Now suddenly it's ours. Dad finally looked up. Don't raise your voice. I'm not. I stopped myself. I just want to understand. Kayla sighed dramatically. You were sneaky about it, Brandon. You never said anything. You just went behind our backs and bought the place. It wasn't yours to begin with. It was going to be, she shot back. Dad talked to Ramirez years ago about turning it into something for the family. You knew that? No, I said slowly, evenly. You didn't want it until I made it successful. You saw the grand reopening photos. You saw the local news segment. You saw people praising me for doing something on my own. And suddenly, it's Kayla's dream? Mom set the knife down. You've always been resentful of your sister. This isn't new. I laughed. I couldn't help it. It wasn't even real laughter, just the kind that bursts out when you're trying not to scream. I've never resented her, I said. I resented the way you acted like I didn't exist unless I was useful. Fixing the AC, helping Dad with the car, babysitting Kayla's dog. But now that I did something you didn't plan, now you care. You wouldn't have any of those skills without your father, my mom snapped. Or this home. Or our name. You think you got there all on your own. Pretty much, I muttered. You were too busy funding Kayla's additions. Kayla slammed her phone down. That money was invested in my future. But you. What? You want a medal for saving burger money and playing entrepreneur? I clenched my jaw. No. I just want to not be sued by my own blood. Dad stood up then, looming over the table. You're acting like a brat, Brandon. We raised you. We sacrificed. You think you did this alone? You think this is just about a diner? This is about you taking something that was meant to stay in the family. Then why didn't you buy it? I asked. Why didn't you step up? His face turned red. He didn't answer. Because they didn't believe in it. Until I made it real. I left before I could say something I'd regret. Slammed the door. Walked straight back to the grill and sat in the kitchen for an hour just breathing, trying to calm the storm in my chest. A week later, it got worse. Kayla went online. She made a public Facebook post with an old photo of us as kids, her in a sparkly dress, me in a stained hoodie, and a long, manipulative caption about family betrayal. She painted me as a greedy little brother who swooped in and stole a lifelong dream from his struggling sister, who only ever wanted to bring art and community into a space of her own. It was dripping with guilt-tripping and vague spiritual buzzwords like alignment and soul purpose. She ended it with some people build with love. Others just steal and rebrand. It went viral, at least locally. People started messaging the Red Oak Grill's page asking if it was true. A few customers even canceled their reservations. One woman told me she wouldn't support a business built on betrayal. I was livid. But worse than the public fallout was the silence from people who should have known better. Family friends. Cousins. My Aunt Cheryl, who once told me I had the strongest work ethic of any kid she knew. Nobody stood up for me. Not one message asking my side. Then came the manipulation. My mom started showing up at the restaurant. Not to eat, just to linger. She'd come in during slow hours, sit by the window, and stare. Sometimes she'd bring baked goods for the staff, like it was still a family gathering. Other times, she'd make passive-aggressive comments about the decor. Your sister would have used warmer colors. Or about the menu. Kayla was talking about a vegan concept, more inclusive. One day, she walked into my office uninvited and dropped a scrapbook on my desk. Inside were baby photos, elementary school awards, drawings I barely remembered. You were always smart, she said. But you were also always stubborn. Just like your uncle. He died alone, I looked up at her. Are you threatening me with loneliness now? She shrugged. I'm reminding you what happens when pride gets in the way of family. And then she just walked out. That night, I sat in the walk-in fridge with the lights off, letting the cold sting my face. I didn't cry, but I wanted to. Not because of the lawsuit, not even because of Kayla, but because I felt like my entire childhood was being rewritten. Like all the years I spent quietly working, quietly hoping they'd be proud, were just being erased. The next blow came during a city council meeting. I'd applied for a permit to expand our patio seating. Nothing fancy, just a few tables out front to catch the summer crowd. I'd filed all the right paperwork, had letters of support from neighboring businesses. But during the meeting, someone stood up during the public comment section. It was Kayla. She gave a teary-eyed speech about community integrity and respecting local culture. Claimed I was turning the restaurant into a soulless chain imitation that would bulldoze history for profit. She even brought up a fake story about me pressuring an elderly neighbor to move just to make room for more parking, which was completely untrue. But it worked. The board denied the permit. I walked out of that meeting with my hands clenched into fists, nails digging into my palms, heart pounding like a drum in my throat. This wasn't a sibling rivalry. This was war. And I had no idea what was coming next. But I was done playing defense. I didn't even want to go to the birthday dinner. It was Kayla's 25th, and my parents insisted on throwing a private family celebration at our childhood home. They made a big show of saying it was a peace offering, a chance to talk things out like grown-ups, but I knew better. The lawsuit hadn't been dropped. The Facebook post was still up, now with over 1,000 likes and more sympathy comments than I could stomach. And just last week, a customer showed me a TikTok Kayla made, standing outside my restaurant, dramatic piano music in the background, calling it the building my brother stole from me. Still, I went. Maybe because some naive part of me still hoped they'd come around. Or maybe because I was tired of fighting. It felt like I was burning at both ends, running the restaurant by day, fielding legal calls by night, pretending none of this was affecting me. But it was. I was barely sleeping. I had snapped at a waitress last week for putting the wrong syrup on the French toast. I never snapped at my staff. So I showed up, dressed nice, brought a bottle of wine, told myself I'd eat, stay polite, and leave early. That was the plan. When I got there, the house was already packed with people, family friends, a few folks I didn't recognize. There were string lights out back and a rented space heater on the patio. My mom was in hostess mode, wearing that fake smile she reserved for holidays and church. My dad gave me a firm handshake like we were coworkers instead of blood. Kayla floated around like the guest of honor at a film premiere, accepting hugs and gushing over a stack of presents piled high on the kitchen counter. I stayed near the food table, tried to blend in, avoided the questions. So proud of both your kids, someone said to my mom within earshot. She smiled. Kayla's had a rough year, but she's pushing through like a fighter. And Brandon? The woman asked. My mom's smile tightened. He's figuring things out. Figuring things out. That was rich. I'd been running a successful business for almost a year. I'd hired 6 employees, balanced accounts, dealt with fire inspections and health codes and payroll taxes. But in her eyes, I was still the little boy with mustard stains on his shirt. Dinner was served buffet style. I ate quickly, then drifted to the edge of the patio, staring out at the yard where Kayla used to practice her performance routines while I raked leaves in the background. It was quiet for a moment, peaceful even. Then my dad came over with 2 drinks and handed me one. You holding up? He asked. I glanced at him. You mean with the lawsuit? He sipped his drink like I hadn't said anything. Your mom thinks you should talk to Kayla. Clear the air. I tried that. She accused me of sabotage and cried to her followers. He sighed. She's emotional. But she's your sister. Yeah, I said. And you're my father. So maybe you should be on my side for once. He didn't answer. Just took another sip and walked off. Eventually, it was time for gifts. Everyone crowded into the living room. Kayla sat in the big armchair, surrounded by gift bags and tissue paper. My mom stood nearby with her phone, filming the whole thing. One by one, Kayla opened each package with exaggerated expressions and breathy thank yous. A spa day, a new handbag, a framed picture of her and my parents at her high school graduation. Then she reached for the envelope. I didn't recognize it. Plain white. No name written on the front. She opened it slowly, pulled out a stack of papers. I saw her face change. First confusion, then dawning excitement. Then she held it up with both hands and beamed like she'd just won the lottery. "Oh my God," she gasped. "You didn't." People clapped. Some cheered. I just stared, heart pounding. "What is it?" someone asked. Kayla turned toward the group, eyes shining. "It's a lease." I frowned. "Lease." My dad stepped forward. "It's a co-lease agreement for a property downtown. A commercial space. Your mother and I signed on as co-guarantors." I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. "We want to help you launch your dream," he said. "For real this time." Kayla burst into tears. The good kind. My mom rushed in to hug her, camera still rolling. Everyone applauded again. And I stood there, holding an untouched drink, frozen in place. They had just handed her a business, while suing me for building mine. I didn't say anything. Not there. Not in front of that crowd. I walked out through the back gate, heart racing, fists clenched, nausea rising. I made it to my car, sat behind the wheel, and just stared. What was the point? Why did I bother? Why did I work double shifts and save every penny for years, only to be treated like a thief while my sister was handed a fully backed business plan on a silver platter? I should have been furious. I should have been ready to burn it all down. But I wasn't. I was hurt, more than I ever expected to be, because it wasn't just betrayal, it was confirmation that I was never really part of the family in the way Kayla was. That no matter what I did, no matter how hard I worked, I'd always be the backup plan. The afterthought, the one they leaned on when they needed help, then ignored when I needed support. I didn't go back inside. I didn't call or text. I ghosted the family for 2 weeks, focused on the restaurant, poured myself into it like it was the only thing holding me together. In a way it was. Then the real betrayal came. It was a Thursday morning. One of my waitresses, Tasha, came into the kitchen looking rattled. "Brandon," she said, "there's a new place opening across the street. You know anything about it?" I wiped my hands. "You mean that old juice bar spot?" "Yeah, but it's not a juice bar anymore. They just hung the banner." She handed me her phone. It was a picture. A big vinyl sign stretching across the storefront window, printed in pastel fonts and bubbly letters. Kayla's Kitchen, a farm-to-table experience. Grand opening this weekend. I felt my stomach drop. The same block. The same branding language she used in that lawsuit affidavit. The same aesthetic as mine, wood grain, minimalist logos, plant-based options. But worse than all that, the menu. I looked it up. She'd posted a preview on Instagram, and it was a carbon copy of mine. Down to the lemon herb aioli on the grilled chicken sandwich, the rosemary sweet potato fries, even the rotating seasonal pie idea I had announced last month. Word for word. I sat down, shaking. It wasn't just petty anymore. It wasn't just a lawsuit or a smear campaign. She was building a clone of my restaurant, across the street, backed by my parents, and opening the same weekend as our anniversary event. I could hear the staff buzzing outside the office. They had seen it too. My kitchen manager poked his head in. "Dude, you okay?" I looked up, and for the first time in months, I didn't have an answer. I wasn't okay, because I finally realized something that had been bubbling under the surface for years. This wasn't about food. It wasn't about business. It was about erasing me. Kayla wasn't trying to chase her dream. She was trying to replace mine. And my parents? They were helping her do it. For the first time in a long while, I didn't open Red Oak Grill the next morning. I couldn't. I stared at the ceiling from my apartment couch, wearing the same clothes I'd passed out in, my phone vibrating nonstop beside me. Texts from staff. Emails from suppliers. A missed call from our local newspaper, probably asking if I had a comment on Kayla's Kitchen, which, according to the press release she posted at midnight, was the future of sustainable comfort food in the heart of our community. A future built on my blueprint. I eventually silenced the phone and rolled over. Not to sleep, just to exist in a different direction. That numb, underwater feeling had crept into everything. The lights were too bright, the sounds too sharp. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. Just hollow. Like something inside had broken off quietly, and no one noticed but me. Red Oak had been the one space in my life that felt like mine. I made every decision that shaped it. Every stool, every sauce, every song that played on the lunch hour playlist. I built that from the ground up. Not out of ego, but out of purpose. And now, not only were my family trying to rip it from my hands through legal warfare, they had cloned it. Brazenly. Loudly. And they had the audacity to slap a pastel sign on it and act like it was an original concept. My concept. My recipes. My voice. My loss. I didn't leave my apartment all day. I skipped 2 meals without realizing it. I finally forced myself into the shower sometime after dark, standing under the hot water until it turned cold, letting it run down my face like it might rinse the betrayal off my skin. The next morning, I forced myself back to the restaurant, but everything felt off. My crew tried to be upbeat. Tasha had made coffee early. Luis, our dishwasher, left a bag of churros with a sticky note that said, "Stay strong, Jeef." I smiled, thanked them, pretended I was fine. But I wasn't. Customers had already started comparing us. I heard them whispering from table 5, 2 girls with expensive nails and messy buns. She copied him, right? Or did he copy her? Dunno. Her place looks trendier. The drinks are cuter. They have that vegan brisket sandwich, though? That was his idea originally. Yeah, but her Instagram is way better. Each word felt like a pebble in my shoe. Small. Annoying. But after enough of them, you start limping. I stayed in the back most of the day. Let the floor manager handle the front. Let the cooks run without me. I'd build a good team. They didn't need me micromanaging. But I felt displaced. Like I was haunting my own restaurant, not running it. Then came the worst part. Saturday. Kayla's kitchen opened. And it was a spectacle. She hired a DJ. Streamers. A food truck for overflow. There were reporters taking photos, bloggers doing on-the-spot reviews, and a local influencer live streaming her trying this signature rosemary sweet potato fries with lemon zest, which had been my seasonal twist just 2 weeks earlier. It was like watching someone wear your skin, your identity, and getting praised for it. That same day, one of my regulars, a sweet older man named George who came in every Sunday after church, walked in, looked around sheepishly, and said, "Brandon, my daughter really wanted to try your sister's place this week. We'll be back next time." I told him it was fine. It wasn't. It kept happening. People who'd eaten with me every week for months started just trying the new place. Just for now. Just once. Just to support her. But the once became twice. And some didn't come back. By Monday, we were down 20% in lunch traffic. A week later, it was 30%. Online reviews for Red Oak started dropping. Not because of quality, but because people assumed we were the copycat. Her PR team had flooded the local foodie scene with press releases claiming she'd been dreaming of this menu for years. That she grew up crafting recipes with her mom. That she was finally stepping into her destiny. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shout from the rooftops that it was a lie, that I'd been flipping burgers since I was 14 while she was busy filming lip-sync videos in her bedroom. That I bled for this dream. That she didn't even know what mise en place meant until 6 months ago. But I didn't scream. I didn't post a rebuttal. I didn't tell my side. I shut down emotionally. Because what would be the point? They didn't care. The world loved a pretty story. And Kayla was great at telling stories, especially the ones that cast her as the underdog and me as the villain. My parents had bought it. The town had bought it. I wasn't sure I had the energy to fight it anymore. I started coming into the restaurant later and later, letting the managers close without me, skipping the morning produce run just to stay in bed another hour. The staff noticed, but no one said anything. They were kind. Too kind. Which somehow made it worse. One night, after another dismal dinner shift, I locked the doors, turned off the lights, and sat in the empty dining room long after everyone left. Just sat there in the booth by the window, staring at the crosswalk outside. That's when I saw it. Across the street, at Kayla's kitchen, the last customer was leaving. One of the staff flicked off the lights inside, and in the reflection of the glass, I saw her, Kayla, standing at the door, staring straight at my restaurant, like she knew I'd be watching. She smirked, just a little, then turned around and disappeared inside. That look, that smirk, was when something changed. Not all at once. Not like a lightning bolt of motivation, but like the faintest spark under wet wood. A tiny flicker of no, of not like this. Because I'd lost before. I'd been ignored, undervalued, passed over, but I'd never been erased. And I wasn't about to let it happen now. The next day, I showed up early. Earlier than anyone. I didn't open the restaurant. I opened my laptop. And I started researching. Not food costs. Not seasonal menus. Not supplier rates. I started researching copyright law, recipe protection, business registrations, trademark filings. I dug through public records to see how Kayla's business was set up, who her silent investors were, how the lease was structured. I called a lawyer. Not my dad's friend from the lawsuit. A real one. Someone who specialized in IP theft and brand dilution. I asked hard questions, took notes, paid in full. Then I started gathering everything. Every saved Google Doc, every menu draft, every design sketch I'd emailed to my graphic designer months before Kayla's dream existed. Every text thread where I discussed my recipes with friends and colleagues. Time-stamped. Organized. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not yet. Because if I'd learned one thing in the past few months, it was that silence could be powerful. When people think you're licking your wounds, they never see the swing coming. It started with cinnamon. More specifically, with the cinnamon caramel bread pudding I added to the dessert menu 2 days after my quiet sit-down with the IP lawyer. A warm, sticky, golden creation made from leftover brioche, infused with brown sugar, cinnamon, and drizzled in a thick, house-made caramel sauce. Served hot with a scoop of vanilla bean ice cream. We plated it on a black slate tile, hit it with powdered sugar like snowfall, and brought it out in a cloud of steam. It wasn't trendy. It wasn't vegan or farm-to-table or made with activated charcoal foam. But it was real, nostalgic, delicious, and people noticed. The first night it was on the menu, a couple posted a picture of it to Yelp, then another to Instagram. Within 3 days, we were getting more requests for dessert than dinner. A local food blogger came in, tasted it, and wrote a piece titled "The Soul in the Sauce: Why Red Oak Grill Still Matters." I didn't smile. Not yet. But I felt something flicker. Something warm. I didn't stop there. We launched Throwback Thursdays, a rotating menu of childhood favorites with a twist. Fancy grilled cheese with garlic confit and aged cheddar. Tomato soup with smoked paprika. Meatloaf sliders on sourdough. I wrote a story for each item on the menu, something personal. A memory. A feeling. I had them printed on little cards and slipped into the napkin holders. People read them. They'd come up to the counter and ask me about the story where I burned my first pancakes and served them anyway. Or the one about my late-night shifts washing dishes just to save enough for my first car. The stories did what the food couldn't. They made me human again. Not just a restaurant owner. A person. Someone with scars and dreams and hands that had actually cooked the things they served. Kayla's kitchen, meanwhile, was still glittering. Still busy. But something shifted. Slowly. Quietly. People started noticing the lack of heart. The too polished vibe. The fact that Kayla didn't cook, didn't prep, didn't even taste half the menu. She showed up in makeup, posted selfies, made TikToks about entrepreneurial manifestation, and then disappeared to do branding meetings with her friends. Her kitchen staff? All underpaid. Constant turnover. Rumors started flying. About a freezer full of pre-packaged ingredients. About missed supplier payments. About her yelling at a hostess in front of customers. I didn't spread those rumors. But I didn't need to. The truth has a way of finding oxygen. Meanwhile, I leaned harder into my truth. I filmed a short video with a local college student who needed portfolio work. Simple. No music. Just me, standing in the kitchen of Red Oak Grill, talking about why I started the restaurant. What food meant to me. I showed the grease burns on my arm. The dent in the counter where I dropped a pan opening week. I talked about Mr. Ramirez and the fryer and saving every dollar from age 14. We posted it on our website, then on our Instagram. Then one of my customers, a sweet middle-aged woman named Deb who ran a Facebook group for small-town businesses, shared it with the caption, "Support places that come from the heart." Brandon earned this. It exploded. People started returning. Slowly at first. A trickle, then a wave. A local radio station called and asked for an interview. A small news outlet did a piece on me titled "From Burger Flipper to Business Owner: The Real Story Behind Red Oak Grill." And just like that, the narrative shifted. I was the underdog now. I was the self-made story. Not Kayla. Not her hashtags. Not her pastel paint. She tried to fight it. Posted a response video accusing me of male privilege and manipulating the media. Claimed I was smearing her and stealing her concept. But by then, the tide had turned. People saw through it. They remembered who they'd seen behind the grill for the past year. They knew whose food made them feel something. And that's when I made my move. My lawyer filed a formal cease and desist against Kayla's Kitchen, citing recipe duplication, brand mimicry, trademark confusion, intentional dilution of a pre-existing local business identity. We included time-stamped designs, original menus, dated food concept notes, screenshots of Slack messages with my designer, email threads from a year prior, and witness statements from former employees who confirmed that Kayla had explicitly used my menu as a reference. The letter wasn't just legal. It was personal. We delivered it the day before her influencer brunch event, an exclusive thing she was promoting with mimosas and gift bags. She tried to act unbothered online, but 3 hours later, she was live on Instagram, crying in her car, claiming she was being bullied by a bitter brother who couldn't handle a woman's success. Only this time, the comments weren't with her. They were full of people calling her out, saying things like, "Wait, but didn't he open first? He cooked for us when we lost power last winter. She just sells tote bags. You don't even work in your kitchen, girl." My phone lit up for hours. People sent screenshots, memes, side-by-side comparisons of our menus. Kayla tried damage control, rebranded half her dishes, took down her signature fry item, quietly stopped claiming her concept was 5 years in the making. But it was too late. The illusion cracked. And once it cracked, it shattered. Meanwhile, I started doing something I'd never had the time or confidence to do before: collaborate. A local craft brewery reached out for a food truck partnership. We launched Red Oak Nights, a weekend rotation of sliders and street-style dishes parked right outside their taproom. Then a local school asked me to speak about entrepreneurship to a class of high school seniors. I said yes, nervously, but afterward, 3 students came up and said they wanted to start food businesses, too. One of them asked if she could intern at the restaurant over the summer. I started getting emails from community organizers, city council, chamber of commerce, all of them wanting to work together. Suddenly, I wasn't just recovering. I was growing. By the end of the quarter, Red Oak's numbers were up 40%. Not just returning customers, but new ones. People from neighboring towns. Foodies who saw the video. Parents who brought their kids and said, "We wanted them to see what hard work looks like." I started sleeping better. Not great, but better. I hired another chef, then a part-time marketing coordinator, then a bookkeeper, because now I had to scale. And with each passing week, I felt stronger. Not just as a business owner, as a person, because for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval. Not Kayla's, not my parents, not even the town's. I was building for me, and for the people who showed up when it counted. I didn't forget what they did to me. I didn't forgive it, either. Not yet, because beneath the menus and the marketing and the meetings, I was still planning something. Something bigger. Not out of pettiness, not out of revenge, out of principle. Because some betrayals can't be ignored. And I wasn't done. Not even close. It was an email that did it. Subject line: Your IP claim versus Kayla's Kitchen, clarification needed. I almost deleted it. Figured it was just another status update from my lawyer's office. But when I clicked it open, I saw an attachment, a scanned document. Messy, low-res, but clear enough to read. At the top, City of Ridgeview, Small Business Grant Application. Dated 7 months ago. Submitted under Kayla Ross. Attached proposal: Creating community through cuisine. Business concept: a modern, soulful take on traditional comfort food rooted in family heritage and passed-down recipes. Then this line: Concept developed in collaboration with sibling Brandon Ross, who will manage the culinary side of the business. I blinked. Read it again, then again, and again. At first, I thought I misunderstood. But there it was, plain as day. Kayla had filed for a $40,000 city-sponsored business development grant using my name and my work, without telling me. Worse, she got it. 7 months ago, while I was deep in kitchen repairs, writing out supplier checks by hand, and surviving on 3 hours of sleep, she was already building her copycat plan behind my back, using my reputation as a selling point to get publicly funded. The email came from someone on the grant board, following up because of recent brand conflicts in the local press. They were now conducting a routine audit, trying to determine whether the project still aligned with the original submission. The person, Lauren Franklin, assistant project coordinator, said they were concerned about the growing public dispute and were requesting a formal statement from me. I sat there frozen, hands still on the keyboard, pulse climbing. This wasn't just plagiarism. It was fraud. And it meant I wasn't just dealing with a petty, social media-obsessed sister anymore. I was dealing with someone who had crossed a very specific legal line. I picked up the phone and called my lawyer. "Brandon," he said, after I read the email to him word for word, "we need to talk." Now, by the end of that week, I had a full copy of Kayla's grant application in my hands, legally obtained through the city's Freedom of Information Act protocol. It was damning. She used language from my original pitch deck, one I'd sent her over a year ago when I naively thought we might collaborate one day. Word for word, paragraphs lifted about community building through shared meals and stories behind the recipes. She even mentioned Red Oak's early test menu and my partnership with Mr. Ramirez, as if it were part of her own origin story. But the most damaging part? She named me, multiple times, as a silent partner with culinary oversight, which meant she'd either lied to the city about my involvement or entered into a partnership she never legally followed through on, using my identity and credibility to cash in on free funding. Either way, it was enough to make that entire grant fall under scrutiny. We drafted a formal report. My lawyer attached the real timeline of Red Oak's conception, time-stamped menus and food photos, text showing Kayla's zero involvement in the build, screenshots of her later social media posts denying my influence. Then we sent it to the grant office. No social media post, no loud announcement, just paper and silence, the kind of silence that makes the guilty sweat. While we waited for the audit results, I played the long game. I leaned harder into local partnerships. A friend from the brewery introduced me to a woman named Leslie. She ran a regional food tourism group that hosted tasting tours and seasonal events. We met for coffee. I showed her my dessert menu. She was skeptical at first, but one bite into the cinnamon caramel bread pudding and her whole demeanor changed. "You didn't go to culinary school?" she asked. "Nope. Just burned a lot of toast until I got better." She laughed. "That's the kind of story we want in our fall showcase." She invited me to be the headline restaurant for the Ridgeview Autumn Harvest Crawl, an all-weekend food event that drew hundreds of guests from out of town, many of whom posted like crazy on Instagram, TikTok, and food blogs. Vendors, live music, tents lined the streets. Guess who wasn't on the invite list? Kayla. She posted a passive-aggressive story about being excluded from patriarchal institutions of taste-making, but no one bit. No one cared. Meanwhile, we had lines down the block. And Leslie? She gave me the opening keynote at the event. I stood on a small stage outside Red Oak, holding a mic in one hand and a plate of glazed brisket sliders in the other, and told my story. The real one. The whole one. I didn't mention names. Didn't air dirty laundry. Just said I started with a fryer, a dream, and a lot of long shifts. I talked about learning flavor balance by accident and building a team that felt like family. The crowd clapped. Some stood. When I looked over to the edge of the tent, I saw my mom. Not clapping, not smiling, just standing there in a beige sweater, arms folded, lips pursed. She didn't speak to me that day, just turned and walked away before the crowd finished applauding. I didn't follow. I didn't need to, because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like the outsider anymore. I was the center, and more importantly, I was holding receipts. 2 weeks later, I got another email from Lauren Franklin. Subject, update, Kayla Ross grant audit, status, suspended. Turns out, Kayla failed to submit her follow-up compliance paperwork, the budget logs, expense breakdowns, and documentation of her community programming, which she never actually delivered. When they reached out, she missed the deadline. Twice. When they pressed further, her responses were inconsistent with the initial submission, and the city had significant concerns over misrepresentation. Translation, she lied. And now the grant was suspended pending further investigation. That wasn't all. Lauren ended the email by saying the board was exploring potential violations of fraud and grant misuse, and they may recommend a clawback of distributed funds. 40 grand. Gone. Or soon to be. I sat there and let that sink in. This wasn't revenge yet, but it was the setup. Because once I had that official letter in hand, I knew what came next. And it wasn't just about proving I was right. It was about making sure the next person who tried to steal from me thought twice. Because Kayla had spent months trying to erase me from the picture. Now, she was about to be erased from her own. Revenge didn't come as some grand, explosive moment. No fireworks, no shouting matches. It came quietly, like the first crack of ice before it splits an entire lake. Small, precise, irreversible, and I made sure every piece fell into place with absolute calm. It started with the letter, the official one from the Ridgeview Small Business Development Office, printed on city stationery and signed in blue ink. It confirmed what Lauren had already told me. The investigation had concluded. Kayla Ross's grant funding had been revoked, and the city was initiating a clawback process to recover misused funds. They were also referring parts of the case to the State Economic Crimes Unit for further review due to potential material misrepresentation and fraudulent filings. Translation: she was in deep trouble. I didn't gloat. Not yet. I made a copy, tucked it neatly into a folder labeled Kayla, Legal, and added it to the pile on my desk next to another document I'd been waiting for, an updated ruling from my attorney. The family lawsuit against me had finally been dismissed with prejudice. The judge called the claim frivolous, citing clear proof that I had purchased the restaurant independently and that there was no legitimate basis for their allegations. They'd spent almost a year trying to bury me, and the court had just buried their case instead. The irony? My parents didn't even show up for the final hearing. Their lawyer withdrew a week before, probably realizing they were about to lose. It was over. On paper, at least. But that wasn't enough. See, they dragged my name through the mud. Online, in court, in public. They'd mocked me for years, humiliated me in front of customers, turned my life's work into a circus. And Kayla? She'd built her empire of lies right across the street, parading around like a visionary while stealing the very ideas she used to roll her eyes at when I was still scrubbing the grill. I wasn't about to let her walk away quietly. So I did what I do best. I worked. The first step was strategic visibility. Red Oak Grill had recovered, sure, but I wanted it thriving. Unshakable. I doubled down on what we did best. Real food, honest stories, no gimmicks. Every Saturday, I hosted Local Legends Night, featuring a short speech or demo from another small business owner. A beekeeper talked about honey sourcing. A baker shared her grandmother's pie crust recipe. We streamed them on Instagram Live, tagged everyone, made it a community event. Within a month, we'd gone from a neighborhood restaurant to a regional talking point. The kind of place travel bloggers stopped by on their way through Ridgeview. I didn't buy ads. I didn't need to. People told our story for me. Then came the partnership. Leslie, the woman from the food tourism group, called one afternoon. Brandon, I've got something for you. There's an opening for the annual Heart of the Valley Food Fest. Big one. Citywide coverage, vendor interviews, regional press. Interested? Interested was an understatement. She helped me apply. Within weeks, I got the confirmation email. Red Oak Grill had been accepted as one of 10 official feature restaurants for the event. We were assigned our own tent and slot on the main culinary stage. Guess who had applied and been rejected? Kayla. I didn't rub it in publicly. I didn't even post about it directly. But I made sure our announcement video was polished, emotional, and unmistakably ours. We opened it with the old black and white photo of me at 14, my first day at Ramirez's burger joint, standing in front of the grill, too short to reach the fryer basket properly. The video faded into shots of Red Oak's busy kitchen, my staff laughing, the sizzling food, the customers smiling. The final frame read, built from the ground up, with love, sweat, and the smell of coffee at 6 a.m. It hit 500,000 views in 3 days. By the time the food fest rolled around, I'd nearly forgotten how good winning quietly felt. The festival took place downtown. Big tents, music, rows of vendors and food trucks, the whole city buzzing. Our tent line wrapped around the block. Kayla's kitchen, meanwhile, sat dark and shuttered across the street. She'd temporarily closed for renovations, according to the note taped to her door. Word around town said her grant clawback had cleaned her out. The city froze her accounts while investigating misuse. Her investors, mostly family friends my parents had convinced to back her, pulled out. The staff quit when paychecks started bouncing. I didn't celebrate that, but I did serve an extra batch of cinnamon bread pudding that weekend. Leslie stopped by on Saturday, beaming. You're the highlight of the event, Brandon. Everyone's talking about Red Oak. I smiled. That's good to hear. Then she leaned in. By the way, the city's business office director is here. He's on the main stage for the awards presentation. You should come up later. Why? She grinned. Just trust me. When they called my name, I didn't expect it. The Community Stewardship Award, the host announced, goes to a small business that exemplifies integrity, perseverance, and a genuine contribution to Ridgeview's local culture. This year's recipient, Brandon Ross, owner of Red Oak Grill. The crowd cheered. Cameras flashed. I walked up, took the plaque, and shook the director's hand. He leaned in just long enough to whisper, "We saw what they did to you. Glad to see you still standing." That moment, just 5 seconds long, felt like 6 years of validation. But the real satisfaction came a week later. A reporter from the Ridgeview Gazette requested an interview about small business resilience. I agreed. We met at the restaurant after hours. She asked about the lawsuit, the family drama, the comeback. I kept my answers simple, clean, never mentioned names, never made it personal, but I made sure to drop one detail. "Funny thing," I said, pretending to think. "Did you know someone tried to register my menu and concept under their own name? Even applied for a grant with it." Her eyebrows shot up. "Really?" "Yeah, but the city caught it, investigated, pulled the funding. Justice has a way of finding its way back, you know." She smiled, tapping her recorder. That's one way to put it. The piece went live that Sunday. Title: Hard Work Over Hype. The real face of Ridgeview's restaurant scene. The subheading: While one family-run eatery collapsed under fraud allegations, another rose by doing things the right way. They didn't use Kayla's name. They didn't have to. Everyone knew. Her silence online was deafening. The Instagram posts stopped. The TikToks vanished. Even her followers started commenting. What happened to Kayla's kitchen? And my parents? For the first time in months, they called. Not to apologize. Not to ask forgiveness. To ask for help. Apparently, the grant situation had affected them, too. They'd co-signed on part of her lease and taken out a small home equity loan to support her launch. Now that the city wanted repayment, the debt was coming back on them. They wanted me to talk to my lawyer, to smooth things over, as my dad put it. I didn't yell, didn't hang up. I just said, calmly, "You sued me, remember?" My mom started to say something, but I cut her off. "You taught me something, though," I continued. "That family only counts when it's convenient. And that lesson? I won't forget." Then I ended the call. The following week, I received a small envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single handwritten note. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought I could handle it. "I'm sorry, Kay." I stared at it for a while. The handwriting was definitely hers. Flowery, overconfident loops, but shaky this time. I didn't respond. Because the truth was, the apology wasn't for me. It was for her. To make herself feel better. And I wasn't interested in offering absolution for a fire sheet set just because she couldn't stand the heat. Instead, I slipped the note into the folder with all the others. My collection of lessons. The proof of everything I'd endured and everything I'd overcome. Now, when I walk through Red Oak Grill at closing time, the lights dim and the kitchen quiet, I still think about where it all started. The sound of the old fryer, the smell of burnt oil, the weight of those first paychecks I refused to spend. I think about 14-year-old me, scrubbing floors while Kayla practiced lines for a school play, never imagining I'd one day be running a place like this. And then I think about how close I came to losing it all, because I trusted the wrong people. Revenge wasn't about hurting them. It was about taking back the narrative. About making sure I decided the ending this time. And I had. But the story wasn't over yet. Not quite. Because one morning, about 2 months after that festival, I walked into the restaurant and found a letter waiting on my desk, sealed in a crisp white envelope with an embossed gold logo. The sender? Ridgeview Culinary Institute. And what it said inside would change everything. The envelope was heavier than it looked. Not physically, just in the way it sat in my hands, like it carried more than words. The logo embossed in gold on the corner belonged to the Ridgeview Culinary Institute, one of the most prestigious schools in the region. Not some fly-by-night culinary boot camp, but the real deal. Alumni had gone on to open Michelin-starred restaurants, become executive chefs, and consult for global food brands. I hadn't applied. I hadn't even considered it. But inside the envelope was an invitation. Not to enroll, but to teach. "Mr. Ross, we followed your story and your work at Red Oak Grill with great interest. Your commitment to authenticity, perseverance through adversity, and community-based culinary entrepreneurship is exactly the kind of real-world perspective we aim to share with our students. We'd like to formally invite you to join our adjunct faculty as a guest lecturer for the fall semester, focusing on restaurant building from the ground up, a case study in grit, growth, and culinary identity. We look forward to your insight. Respectfully, Dean Carla Alvarez, Ridgeview Culinary Institute. I read it twice, then 3 more times, then set it down and just breathed. I wasn't emotional often, but that letter? It hit something deep. Not because I needed validation, but because it proved that everything I'd been through, every long night, every burned hand, every insult they'd thrown my way, meant something. It wasn't just survival. It was proof that I'd built something worth teaching. I accepted, of course, not to boast, not to stand in front of a whiteboard and gloat, but because if someone like me, who started at 14 flipping burgers, who was called a thief by his own parents, could stand in front of a classroom and say, "You can build something out of nothing," then maybe the next kid wouldn't have to fight as hard to be taken seriously. But that wasn't the end. The real fallout came in waves. Kayla was the first to feel it. The city's Economic Crimes Unit finished their investigation and officially declared her in violation of the grant's terms. She was ordered to repay $42,000, the original amount plus fees. She tried to fight it, claimed miscommunication, but the documents were airtight. Emails, applications, that recording she posted online saying I had nothing to do with her dream, that became Exhibit A. Her investors didn't just pull out, they sued her. Civil suit, breach of trust, and misrepresentation. She didn't have the money to settle, and from what I heard through a mutual acquaintance, she had to sell her car and move back in with our parents while sorting it out. Her Instagram went quiet. Comments got locked. The pastel aesthetic disappeared overnight. But she wasn't the only one facing consequences. My parents lost a lot, too. They'd co-signed her lease, backed her in public, took out a second mortgage on a house that wasn't even fully paid off. When Kayla defaulted, the bank came knocking. And when the city clawed back the grant, the liens started piling up. They tried to hide it at first, pretended nothing had changed. But it didn't take long before the whispers started. My mom stopped showing up at church. My dad sold his truck. They started shopping at the discount grocery store on the edge of town, where people wouldn't ask questions. One day, my Aunt Cheryl, who had always stayed neutral, came by the restaurant after closing. She sat at the counter and asked for a coffee. I poured her one, and she looked at me for a long time before finally saying, "They're not doing well, Brandon. Losing the house. It's real this time." I nodded. Quietly. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. But I also didn't offer help. Because they weren't just people who made a mistake. They were people who looked me in the eye and tried to take my life from me. Who used the word family like a rope, first to tie me down, then to strangle me when I stood up for myself. They made their choices. And now, so did I. Fall semester started, and I showed up to my first lecture nervous out of my mind. I wore my cleanest button-up, brought slides, and even practiced my talking points the night before. But when I walked in and saw the faces of those students, eager, hungry to learn, I felt something settle inside me. I told them everything. Not just the victories, the failures, the humiliations, the burned bridges, the moments I almost gave up. I showed them pictures from the early days, the broken sign, the greasy kitchen, the clunky menus. I told them about the cinnamon bread pudding and why it mattered. I even told them about my family, carefully and without bitterness. They listened, took notes, asked good questions. And at the end of class, one girl came up and said, "My mom said I should go to law school. But after today, I think I want to open a bakery instead." I smiled and meant it. Back at Red Oak, things kept growing. We were featured in a regional food magazine. I got nominated for Young Business Leader of the Year. And one evening, while doing paperwork in my office, I found a letter slipped under the door. No envelope, just a sheet of lined paper. Handwritten. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say that you were right. I wanted the image. You built the reality. You were always better than me, Brandon. I just couldn't admit it until I lost everything. If you ever feel like talking, I'll be around. I'm staying in the guest room now. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm sorry. K. I stared at it for a while, then folded it carefully, added it to the folder. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because some bridges aren't burned in anger. They're burned in clarity. And some apologies aren't meant for healing. They're meant to close the book. Months passed. Seasons changed. And on the first anniversary of Red Oak Grill's reopening, The real one. I stood behind the counter, watching the team serve our busiest dinner crowd yet. The lights were warm. The room was full. Laughter echoed off the wood-paneled walls. The music was soft, familiar. And there, in the back booth, exactly where it all began, sat Mr. Ramirez. My old boss. The man who gave a 14-year-old kid a chance with a spatula and a smile. I walked over, set down a plate of fries with extra aioli, and he grinned. "Still using my fryer oil trick?" he asked. "Modified it," I said, sliding into the seat across from him. "You always burn the garlic." He laughed. "You did good, Brandon." I looked around. At the team. The customers. The walls we'd painted ourselves. The dream no one believed in but me.